Is Michael O'Brien, who's with the Atlantic County Historical Society, and he's going to talk to us about the Veterans History Project, and it's related to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. So, Michael?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Much less stressful seeing Charlie tonight. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was a banker in central New Jersey, and one of the accounts that I had to manage was the Boy Scouts Endowment Fund. And guess who the chairman of the investment committee was? So I used to have to come and explain myself away to Charlie once every 3 months about how we were doing vis-a-vis the market. So it's good to see Charlie under not so difficult circumstances tonight.
And remember, I'm just substituting.
Yeah, I understand that. Also, I want to say a shout out to Ben Brenner, my colleague, who was on a trustee of the Atlantic County Historical Society with me. Again, I lived in Toms River, retired, moved down to Linwood. We've been down here about 6 years now, love it. And I decided I wanted to do something different. I'd always kind of liked history, enjoyed history. And I thought, you know something, maybe I'll just go down to the local historical society and see if they would volunteer. So I went in there and I spoke to the guy that ran the place, and I said, look, I'm not from the area. I really don't know that much about Atlantic County or South Jersey history. I said, but I am willing to help. And they said, oh, no problem. Said, if you don't know anything, we'll put you under Ben's tutelage. So Ben's been around since Abraham Lincoln. And so he'll be able to basically teach you what you need to know for the job. I said, oh, that's great. So I'm a little bit nervous because we're there, and one of the things we have to do is talk to patrons that come in that are looking for history of their families, genealogy, and we have thousands of volumes, 30,000 obituaries. I mean, it just goes, it's by the library here. We got a chance to take a walk down there in Summers Point and take a look at it. And so I'm a little bit nervous. The first lady comes in the first day I'm on the job with Ben, and she basically says, yeah, I'm in from like Minnesota, and we're here for like a couple of days. We want to do some research on our families. I said, oh boy, here we go, because I think I'm a little new at this. And she said, yeah, I want some information about the Steelmans, about the Lakes, and about the Risleys. And Ben pipes up, no problems, I'm related to all of them. So to see Ben tonight. But what I'm talking to you tonight is about the Veterans History Project. And really what I'm doing tonight is making an appeal. I know most people get nervous when they hear the word appeal. I'm not looking for money. What I'm really looking for something is more important than that, more valuable than that. And that's really your time. Your time to avail yourself to the Veterans History Project. So before we do that, we are sponsored, the Veterans History Project is sponsored by the Library of Congress. And to me, I didn't know that much about the Library of Congress until I got involved with this project 6 years ago. And what I found out about it is that the Library of Congress really got its start when the government first formed in 1790. We met in New York City, and the legislators got there, and the senators and the congressmen, and they said, you know, knowledge is power, and we need a library. But they didn't have any money. The government had no money. They said, well, what are we going to do? And somebody said, well, there's a library across the street, the New York City Library. Why don't we just use that? And that's what they did. So they spent zero on the library from 1790 until 1800. And in between, they moved from New York to Philadelphia. So now they get to Philadelphia, the government gets to Philadelphia, they look around and say, hey, wait a minute, knowledge is power, we need references, we need books. He said, hey, Ben Franklin has a library across the street. Why don't we just use that? So they did. So they did that until 1800. In 1800, the government moved to Washington, D.C. What was the problem? Washington, D.C. was a swamp. There was nothing there. They looked around and said, okay, where's the library? And there wasn't one. So by an act of Congress in 1800, the Library of Congress, as we know today, was formed. And how it was formed was they spent money. They actually bought 780 books from a London bookseller, had the book shipped over to Washington, and that became the basis of that library. And from 1800 to 1814, that library grew to approximately 3,000 volumes. It was all housed, believe it or not, in one room of the Capitol. So one big room in the Capitol, 3,000 books. Any congressman, any senator who needed to read research on a bill or research on an issue would go to that library. And everything was working out fine until what happened in 1814. The British burned the library down to the ground. So now they're back to square one. So what do they do next? Who came to the rescue? Thomas Jefferson, right. So Thomas was down in Monticello. He had spent 20 years, 25 years in government service. He had a 5,000-acre plantation in Virginia. He had 400 slaves. He had a big nut to crack in terms of what it cost to run the place, and he had been there doing it for 20 years. He was hopelessly in debt. He was literally going to go to debtor's prison. He owed $25,000 to his creditors in 1815, and they were coming after him. But Tom had an idea. He says, you guys need a library? I got a library. So Jefferson sold his 6,457 volume library to the Library of Congress. Anybody want to guess how much he charged them? $27,000. He needed $2,000 to cover his wine bill. So from there, the Library of Congress basically exploded in growth. To today, if you take a look at the Library of Congress, it's clearly the largest library in the world. No question about it. The British Museum Library will say, well, we think we have more volumes, but we really don't know. We kind of got lost count. The Library of Congress will tell you, if you look on their website today, that they have 173,536 volumes in their possession. So they know exactly what they own. They are, in terms of the breadth of their knowledge, 60% of their library is in English. The other 40% is in 470 different languages from all around the world. The Library of Congress has the largest collection of music, has the largest collection of maps, has the largest collection of Bibles. You name it, I think you're going to find that the Library of Congress owns it. Now, as part of their service to the country, they said, well, we have to be the keeper of the records. Certainly there's the National Archives, but someone has to keep the history of the country. And the Library of Congress says, we're going to pick up that mantle. We want to do that. So that's what they've done. And as part of that, they've amassed a collection of just about every president that does not have a presidential library. All of those documents are housed with all of the statutes, all of the anything to do with the government of the United States is housed at the Library of Congress. In the year 2000, a group of of senators and congressmen were sitting around, as the story goes, talking, and they said, you know something? We have all these wonderful World War II vets. This is in 2000, that are starting to die away. And no one has really heard their stories. We've heard the story of the generals. We've heard the story of the strategists. What we really haven't heard is the oral history of those guys who tell their stories at the local bar, or tell their stories at family meetings, but those stories are being lost. And what we want to do is find a way to preserve those stories. And with the technology that was available in the year 2000, it said, hey, we can take voices. We don't have to just jot down the person's story, type it up and put it away. We can actually record these veterans. They can tell their story. We'll take those stories and we will house them in the Library of Congress so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, that veteran's parent, or son, grandson, great-grandson, not only can read about Grandpa's service in World War II, he can hear his voice. You can hear what he actually said about his experiences in Bastogne, his experiences on D-Day. I would have loved to have heard my father do that. My dad was both there on D-Day and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Never got the chance to do it. I'm kind of sad that my son and my grandson can't hear his voice. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here to say that if any, how many, just by show of hands, because I've already interviewed 1 or 2 people in this room. By a show of hands, how many people here has been interviewed by the, yep, here we go. So, if any of the other you are veterans and you'd like to be interviewed, we do it through the Atlantic County Historical Society. I'm the chairman of that committee. We have 6 or 7 interviewers. We interview folks. Our responsibility basically is the 2nd Congressional District, which is basically, you know, down here, a little bit of ocean, all of Atlantic, a little bit all of Cape May, going west a little bit. So that's basically our responsibility. So, any questions about that? I'm going to hand out brochures talking about it. If you're interested yourself, if you have a relative, a brother, a sister, a parent, a child that wants to be interviewed. I've interviewed veterans that are 30 years old, and I interviewed a guy 2 years ago. It was a great honor to interview a World War II veteran. And I'm just going to spend just 5 minutes talking to you about that because it was so special to me, that interview. This guy was a local guy. He grew up maybe 5 to 10 miles from here. He's still alive, 96 years old. Doesn't want really to be bothered, so I'm not going to use his name. But his story goes something like this. He was born in 1928 on a farm, in the same bedroom that his father was born in. Okay? Small farm, not too far from here. The furthest he went as a child north was Toms River. The furthest west he ever went in his life, once he went over the Delaware River to go to a baseball game in Philadelphia. That was it. That was the extent of his world travels. And the war came along, he quit school in 8th grade because he was the only son of a family that had a 40-acre farm, and the Depression was going on. So he quit school in the 8th grade, started working full-time on that farm. In 1945, in February, he turned 17. He went to his parents and said, I don't want this war to end without me being in it. He said, I'm a patriot. I want to join the Navy. with a letter from his mother. He went hitchhiked from the farm down the White Horse Pike to downtown Atlantic City, went into the Navy recruiting office, said, I'm here to join the Navy. They said, fine, take a physical, give you some tests, see how you do. An hour or so later, they said, okay, you passed the physical, go home, we'll call you in 2 or 3 weeks, and you can join the Navy. He said, I'm ready to go now. They sent him that afternoon from downtown Atlantic City on a train to New York. He got into Times Square around 6 o'clock that night. He spent around 3 hours being processed there. They put him on a train. He was in Great Lakes Nebula Air Station by 6 o'clock the next morning. He was in the Navy. Since the war was going on, this is, again, you have to remember the time now, this is February of 45. Battle of the Bulge is over. The war in Europe is pretty much over. You know, Hitler isn't dead yet, but the U.S. forces are driving Hitler back into Berlin. Our guy, instead of getting 8 weeks of basic training, they say, since the war is on, you get 4. You get 4 weeks of basic training, then we're shipping you off. Never goes home. He goes right from the Great Lakes Naval Air Station to Norfolk, Virginia. And there he's assigned to the USS Randolph, an aircraft carrier. He has no skills. He's 17 years old. Never been home. Away from home. Right? He wants to serve. They said, we're going to make you a cook. Because that's the only thing, you know, you're really skilled to do. He was totally happy with that. He went off, his ship was in dry dock because it got completely banged up in the Battle of Coral Sea. It had to be, basically, I read the story of this. The Coral Sea got so injured with torpedoes that they had to lift back from the Coral Sea to Norfolk, Virginia, 3 miles an hour, 8,000 miles, 3 miles an hour. They got back to Norfolk, they completely refitted it, had it ready to go. He steamed out of Norfolk. They were heading down back to Japan for the rest of the war. He got as far as the Falkland Islands. The war's over. They bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You would think, well, that's the end of the story. Not for him. That was just the beginning of the story. The Navy was so concerned that the Russians were going to just sweep across Europe after they captured Berlin, that they wanted to make sure that the U.S. government had a show of force in the Mediterranean to deter the Russians from going east, going west. So there he was. He was in the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, on an aircraft carrier with Russian MiGs buzzing over the top of the 17-year-old kid. He gets back from that mission, and you would think that the war's over, but guess what? He signed a 4-year commitment to the Navy. They were kind enough to send him back out 2 more times. They sent him to, actually 3 times. In 4 years, he did 4 sailings in 4 years. He went back to Europe, came back, then they sent him to Subic Bay in the Philippines, came back. They sent him to Okinawa, came back. Came back in 1949. Kid's all of, what, 21 maybe? Yeah, 21-year-old kid. What do you think he does? Takes the GI Bill, goes off, you know, no. Goes right back to the same farm with his mom and his dad. He's there plugging away with his family. Father died in 1965 and mother died in the early 80s. Never married. Continued to try to work the farm until I met him. He got to the point, he said, look, I just can't do it anymore. I said, I'm 92 to 3 years old. He said, I just need to retire. So he sold the farm and he moved into like an all-care place, a very nice one, matter of fact, very nice one. And he told me a story. Now, he has no living relatives. There's no brothers, no sisters, no children, no grandchildren. And I said to him, I said, well, he found me. That was the most amazing thing about this whole story. Normally, we go out and find veterans and ask them, do you want to be interviewed? This guy found us. How he did, I have no idea. But he found us. And I said to him, why? Why is it important for you to tell your story? And he said, because I want to make sure that people know that there are patriots in this country. Thank you very much.